Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office. Welcome to the morning grind. I'll be your host. I'm Heath. And today we actually have a very special morning grind because we have someone who whose work we have been studying very closely for the past few days. Can't see me. Uh-oh. Well, hang on. I wonder why that happens. I can see me. Just 1 second. Let me log out and log back in. Just 1 second. How about now? Anybody out there? Did that work? Yeah, I'm not sure what that must be a StreamYard thing. All right. So anyway, we have a very special morning grind today because we are joined by the author of the book, the series on the Right Club that we have been looking at. We've got Steal the Story up today, but hey, you can't do better than actually having the author right here. I'm looking at everybody right here, so let's go ahead and bring him on right now. Welcome. Now, Adron.
What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Thanks
Or
for having
Death.
Oh yeah, that's a character from that's my favorite character I ever created. It's the necromancer from my Soothsayer series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. It is great to have you here. And I was just looking in the chat. We've got oh no. So you were talking through Phaser Wrist here.
Yeah,
So Phaser Sable Phoenix is here. Good morning. As an add-on from yesterday's stream where I wasn't on the live stream, How to Train Your Dragon is a Heroine's Labyrinth archetype. I was watching How to Train Your Dragon yesterday because I wanted to do that before I started plotting again. Good morning, James. The reviews. All right. Well, do you want to introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what it is that you do? I brought up your I'm going to share your book here. We've been looking at obviously a bunch of the nonfiction books, but we also have right here, Veilfall from the Soothsayer series. Oh, so I'll put that up.
Yep.
While you introduce yourself. There we go. Not quite right this morning. All right, there we go.
That book was actually #1 on I think 3 of Amazon bestseller lists.
Oh, really?
Got lucky on that one. Yeah. Which can tell you a lot about Amazon because if you look, it's only got 80 reviews, and it was #1 on 3. I think 3 might have been 4 bestseller lists on Amazon. That tells you something right there.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody? So you're a fantasy author, but also writing nonfiction about story, which has obviously been very helpful to us. But let everybody know who you are.
My name's Adron. I just go by Joe. My middle name is Joe because most people can't pronounce my name or they think I spelled it wrong. Call me Aaron or Adam. Been dealing with that for 44 years. It's real nice. Been writing since I was a kid. Love writing. Love fantasy. I got my start in fantasy with Hero Quest when I was a kid. Love Hero Quest. You can't really see it, but I got a whole thing stacked up with all the extensions. I don't know if you got the email or not, but I got a notification last night that Hasbro sending out the 2 new expansions for it. Should be coming here soon. I
didn't get to check email yet this morning, but I actually saw just scrolling by late last night. It came across that somebody like their store or something had said I picked up 2 like advanced copies of the new expansions. So yeah, I didn't know there were expansions coming, but apparently there are.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yep. And I'm excited because I just got my freaking Axiom Quest Infinite Dungeon deck. Literally right before I click on here. I've been waiting for that for a couple of weeks. But yeah, I don't know. Ask me whatever you want.
We got those cards as well. We reviewed those cards on the channel. Yeah,
I got all of them. I finally got the whole bundle now. Things out.
Well, all right. Then how did you get started writing?
Well, I've been writing since I was a kid. I love writing and stuff. I didn't really take it seriously until a handful of years ago. I used to just screw around and write stories here and there, and then toss the notebook in a drawer or something like that. Then, when I started writing, I'm proof anybody can become a successful author. Not that I'm like some kind of multi-millionaire or nothing like that, but hell, I'm a high school dropout. You know what I'm saying? If I can do it, I'm dumber than a wet bag of hammers. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And yeah, I just didn't take it seriously until a handful of years ago, and then I knew nothing about plot. I've never taken any writing courses or nothing like that, and so I started researching plot and all that stuff, and I became obsessed with it.
Well,
and
like
the reason why I wrote.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying it sounds like it fits in
the reason why
right around here.
The reason why I wrote those plot books is I have learned so much about plot over the years just because of my obsession with it. I want to get it out to as many writers as possible because I know that the stuff that I've learned. The whole point of the books is, it's taken me years to learn this stuff, but I've been able to condense it into books so that for you, it can take hours to learn the same thing. It's going to save you time, and it's going to help other writers become better writers. That's my main goal with the plot books. It's one of the reasons why I'm constantly putting them for free on Kindle and stuff. Because I just want people to download them for free and share them and stuff like that. Buy the paperbacks if you want, put a little bit of money in my pocket, but I ain't really worried about that. I'm more worried about the spread of information to help people, I wish I would have known this stuff years ago.
Well, I do like the philosophy behind the stuff that was in some of the books as far as approaching story structure and stuff, because I haven't found that too many books on writing have been all that useful. Now, some have.
Yeah, I've read, sorry, I'm trying not to cuss. I tend to cuss a lot, but I don't want you to get demonetized or however that works on YouTube. But I've got, you can't really see it, my whole wall in front of me behind my monitor is nothing but hundreds and hundreds of books. I've got a couple hundred books on just plot. And most of them, probably not, 9 out of every 10 of them, they just rehash the same old tired stuff. It's just somebody taking something that's you already know, and they just give it different little names, and they don't even go into details about it. And that's one thing that always got on my nerves is I wanted something that went into the most detail possible to tell me everything about plot. And that's what I tried to do with Stomping Kittens. If you can only get one of my books on plot, I would advise to get Stomping Kittens, because it's the other ones kind of are summed up into the Stomping Kittens. It's kind of my own, I can't stand when people use this phrase, my journey. It's kind of my journey of learning about plot. I want to punch myself in the face right now just for saying my journey. My journey and my truth. I can't stand them two things. But Stomping Kittens is kind of the culmination of all of them other plot books. Except for Steal the Story. That one's basically, its sole focus is log lines.
Yeah, I don't know anything about writing log lines because I haven't had to do it yet, but I heard that's what that one was on. So we might talk about that here in just a second. But yeah, Stomping Kittens. As soon as we started reading this the other day and reviewing it here online. So if you want to check out Stomping Kittens, first of all, it looks like it's still free at the moment. But also, we looked at the first however many pages, I don't know, here on the Morning Grind a few days ago. So you can actually check out what's in it. James says these books are the best distillation of plot and story I've ever read.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it. Well, hopefully they help you.
And yeah, Sable Phoenix says Hero Quest is a bit of a cornerstone of the Geekverse around here.
I've still got my old Hero Quest back from I think it was 91 when it came out in the States.
So do I. I've got my main Hero Quest box is the Hero Quest box that I was given for Christmas the year it came out. There are pictures of me opening it up on Christmas Day, and I still have it in the gaming room over there. That exactly. Okay. Well, so let me. You also immediately helped me because I was in here writing last night or getting ready to plot because I've been trying to get stories out for a long time, and I have not been able to do it. It seems like I've been doing a bunch of other things, and I've been trying to work for 2 years to get basically a story ready to go.
Yeah.
And I've been like on 4 different versions, and so I'm trying to plot it out before we start writing in November again. But even things like your relationship with the prologue, like when you're talking about the prologue needs to be about, because I had a great prologue, but I realized that you said that it did not need to have the protagonist in it, which it did not. Yeah. But then you said, but it needs to be about the protagonist.
Yeah,
and it's not. Mine's not.
That's a common thing, but don't take anything in my plot books as like a commandment, because one of the things I try to get across is you need to learn the rules. That's why you kind of adhere to like the plot skeleton. You need to learn the rules in order to break the rules, to understand how and when you can do that. So that's the typical prologue is typically about the hero but without the hero. But it doesn't mean that your prologue needs to be that. You can have a prologue with about that has the hero in it and stuff like that. But that's kind of like the average that a prologue has to be about, like, especially in movies. Movies are just visual stories, so I constantly recite them because if we've seen the same movie, it's easy to just reference because they're more objective. Books are more subjective because your imagination is really factoring into picturing that stuff. But a movie, you're seeing it stream on a screen, so we're both kind of seeing the same thing. And a lot of movie prologues they're typically around 3 to 7 minutes if you notice. It depends on the genre, because especially horror movies typically have a prologue where they're trying to instantly grip you. And there's also another thing in horror movies too, but very common in horror movies, the cell phone thing. I can tell you that here in a second. But the horror movies, they're trying to instantly grip you, so they'll give you kind of like some kind of attack by the monster or something like that, in the very beginning to grip you real quick, and then they start the story. That's very common. Like with Jaws. Jaws opens with a shark attack. A lot of people think that the inciting incident of Jaws, if you ask the common person, will say something about, it must be the shark attack because of the shark attack, the rest of the story takes place. But it's not true. That's just the prologue. An inciting incident has 4 requirements. If I keep talking too much, just tell me to shut up. I won't take any.
No, that's fine. It's fine.
To talk
No, go. Those are all the best guests.
Well, like an inciting incident, I had a problem for so many years about trying to figure out exactly what an inciting incident is, because it can be kind of confusing. When you look stuff up online, you get different opinions, and so you'll look at the same movie and you have 2 different people tell you an inciting incident in the same movies at different plays. And over the years, I've learned that there's 4 requirements for an inciting incident, and that's that it has to happen to the protagonist. It must present the first awareness of the story's central conflict. It must have something to do with the dominant character flaw, which is the spine of your story. That's what your story is about, and whether they overcome it or sway to it. And then they're either rewarded or punished. And it must be linked to the antagonist. So if you're confused about your inciting incident, remember those 4 key traits, and then go back to the beginning of your story. I'm blocking my screen, and then find the first scene that fits those 4 requirements. That's your inciting incident. If it's not a great inciting incident or whatever, you can then manipulate it. But that's how you know it's an inciting incident. It happens to the protagonist, must present their first awareness of the story's central conflict, must be connected in some way to their dominant character flaw, and it must be linked to, in some way, however vague or detailed, to the antagonist.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this with the beginning here. I've been trying to write a film script first. I was told go ahead and do this as a film script, and then take it from there and do the novel. So I hadn't actually ever thought about doing it that way, but this is the way that was recommended to me. So that's the way that I've been doing it now. And so a big part of the film script thing is to make sure that you've got a gripping first 10 pages. It's very strict about, a lot of people just read 10 pages of 110 or 120 page film script. So you got to have something that's really gripping and hooks you by that first 10 pages. And this really has to, your protagonist has to be introduced, and they've got to be doing something. And so I was really pushing that. And getting these 10 pages to make sure that how does the story start? And then I realized, I'm basically, I'm sorry.
I just said there's an easy way to do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but after you're done, I can give you an example of an easy way to do that.
Okay, let's do that. We can do that, because what I realized is that I was, as a result, basically trying to pack the whole first act into 10 pages. So, I came in swinging. I got like a 2-minute prologue, and then 8 pages to come in swinging, and it's just too fast. But I still got to have that in 10 pages. So how do I do that?
Well, an easy way to do it, if you want to have a gripping opening in media res, in action, something like that. I'm sure you're familiar with the Blake Snyder Save the Cat beat sheet. The 5-point finale is a fantastic way, even though it's the ending of the beat sheet. You think of it as the book that you're writing. Think of it as a sequel, even if it's not. Think of it as like a sequel to another book. And then now you have the 5-point finale. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. Think of the 5-point finale. Write that is like the pretend climax from the book preceding your book that doesn't actually exist. And then that's because it's all going to be action. And then you can use that as your opener, because you immediately have the protagonist doing something. Because you're opening with the old world stasis. What you're doing is showing them it's a slice of life of the protagonist, and you need to show them in action and show them their skills and traits and this and that, and their dominant character flaw and their enabling circumstances and all that stuff. And so when you're to show them in action, it's a real easy thing to do, is to just take the fake climax from the previous book that doesn't exist and write that out, and then cut off. There's kind of like a 10% rule where because so many writers, I used to do this too for a long time, get so detailed in I have to start every scene at the very beginning, and I have to end every scene at the very end. And you actually don't want to do that, but it's natural to do that. So the 10% rule is you chop off 5 to 10% of after you write a scene. Chop off the first 5 or 10% of the beginning and or the first 5 or 10% of the end, and then you've got the meat in the middle that's got all the action going on. You kind of cut out all the boring setup that doesn't. You kind of get bogged down in the details and stuff like that.
James, actually, I was wondering the same thing.
You
I
can
wonder.
transition from that, the whole scene.
James says, I wonder if the opening of Star Wars hits the beats of the 5-point finale.
Well, that's not.
Like
it's not something that you always have to do. It's just a suggestion. You know what I mean? I found that it works rather well. There's plenty of ways to open a story like that.
We've done a lot of analysis of Star Wars, like a lot of people have.
That's probably the most analyzed movie ever made.
Yeah, and I was saying that we don't often see Empire Strikes Back analyzed. I mean, you see examples here and there from it, but so many people will say that Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars. That's not an uncommon opinion. But of course, the original Star Wars is always used as an example of the hero's journey. But I don't really see people take a deep dive into Empire Strikes Back nearly as much, even though a common opinion is that it's the best. So one day we're really going to have to do that and really hit Empire Strikes Back hard.
Well, if I remember right, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, they don't possess their own separate heroes' journeys. That they're supposed, because they're the continuation of the previous movie and stuff. They're supposed to have an overall arcing of the hero's journey too. Like the one is kind of condensed, but then the second one, it's not your typical hero's journey. It's kind of like the opposite. Like I think George Lucas said something like he fiddled. He used the typical hero's journey for the first one and then fiddled with them for the other two because he didn't want to repeat the same plot line, whatever you will call it. So I think that might be why some people might be hesitant or something, about breaking it down. Because just like a lot of writers are hesitant about telling you about the tragic hero journey, they typically just tell you about the triumphant protagonist journey, and that's it.
Okay, there are actually two ways that we can go off of that. Because you did provide some very interesting information on sequels, and there wasn't a whole lot there, but it was something really insightful that I thought. We all loved The Wound, Shield, and Sword. That's from Stomping Kittens. That hit us all very. But then you gave a way to transfer somebody into a sequel by building in a new scar, or building in a new scar in one book that takes the place of the old scar that's been resolved in that, and then using that to propel the character arc in the next book.
Oh yeah, because you can at the end of your first book. I'm sorry, I keep putting my hand up. I'm so used to gesticulating with my hands, I keep putting it in front of my camera. Sorry about that. But yeah, you can establish another wound for your sequel, and then that's going to be the wound for your protagonist's new wound, because they can't have the old wound from the previous book, because the whole entire point of the previous book is that they if they surrender to it, if it was first a tragedy, but typically it's a triumph. But if they overcame it, then they require a new wound, and they're going to accrue that sometime during the previous book, and then you carry that over as their new wound. So it makes writing the sequel that much easier. Sequels are a lot easier to write because of that, because your wound or your scar, and then you have your shield and sword, or your flaw and your virtue. I can go into if you want me to go into more detail about the whole wound, shield, and sword real quick. I can give an example from my movie that's perfect about that.
All right, sure. Okay. James says that I incorporated wound, shield, and sword into my NaNoWriMo outline. I did it immediately upon reading them as you described them. So this is something that really resonates with people. So this is from Stomping Kittens' book. So if people want more, that's where to get it.
Good.
Let people know right now. Let's go into it.
Okay, yeah, I'll give you a detailed thing right here. Spider-Man Homecoming, I love using this as an example. Everybody knows that Peter Parker's wound is his death of Uncle Ben. Okay, that's been established. If you're a comic book nerd like how I was, comic books suck now, but back in the day, I used to read comic books like crazy. Everybody knows his wound is the death of Uncle Ben. Young, arrogant Spider-Man could have prevented the death of his Uncle Ben, but he didn't, and Uncle Ben died for it, so he blames himself. That's and because of that, that's his wound, and he fears that he's not going to be able to protect his friends and his loved ones because of that. That gives him a flaw versus virtue argument of doubt versus confidence, or insecurity versus confidence. However you want to put it. And so that during Spider-Man Homecoming, that's his dominant character flaw is doubt. He's doubting himself the entire movie. It's only whenever he finally realizes, let me get to that here in a minute. Let me set that up. the suit that he gets in Civil War from Tony Stark, the one that has all the high-tech suit gadgets and stuff and all that, the suit in Spider-Man Homecoming solely exists. In Spider-Man Homecoming, by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's the one with Michael Keaton as the Vulture and all that stuff. But the suit solely exists to prey on his dominant character flaw of insecurity, because he's the entire movie, he's looking for something that's going to make him a better Spider-Man, because he preys on the whole the powers within you trope, because he has yet to realize that he is just, he's fine the way he is Spider-Man. So throughout the whole movie, he's looking for ways to make himself a better Spider-Man, but he's always looking from without instead of within. That's the problem. And so, he convinces his friend Ned, who's running diagnostics with his laptop on the spider suit, and he's like, "Hey, Peter, there's all kinds of digital child locks on this." And Peter's immediately like, "Unlock them, let me have access to them," because he's like, "I need to get access to that stuff because it's only going to make me a better Spider-Man." And it goes back and forth between the flaw and the virtue. The suit is going to help him and hinder him, and stuff like that throughout the movie. Because you always want to go back and forth between the flaw and the virtue. You don't want to just present the flaw as bad, the virtue is good. That's just a lecture. Nobody likes to be lectured. Okay,
and that's done a lot in today's film.
I could spend like, huh?
Oh, I said the lecture is done a lot in today's film. It's just one side of something, and it's not the argument back and forth.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of bad movies today, but I mean, it really amazes me how when I was a kid, how many so good movies there were, and now they're just Hollywood just rehashing and stuff. But back to the Spider-Man thing before we get off track. He's using that suit and dealing with the bad guys and all other stuff. We'll move through the plot because I could dissect this movie for hours. Okay, his dominant character flaw is insecurity. And he's always looking for a way to be a better Spider-Man and stuff like that. And he's always searching from without. Well, at some point, if you remember the boat scene where the boat gets split in half, he's chasing the bad guys there, and everything's kind of falling apart for him. That's in Act 2B. Well, Tony Stark shows up as Iron Man, and he comes to get the suit back, and because Peter's disappointed him. He's broke into the suit, and he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And this is where Peter Parker vocalizes his dominant character flaw, because he says, "But I need the suit to be Spider-Man." That's what he's vocalizing his dominant character flaw. And then Tony gives him this sagacious advice that comes into play during the Rubicon, aka the spiritual crossing. If you need the suit to be Spider-Man, you shouldn't be wearing it. That's the lesson he needs to learn. That's what he's been needing to learn the entire time. And so he takes the suit away. Peter goes back to his life and goes to the prom and this and that stuff. And, he ends up then chasing down the Vulture. And he tracks him down into this warehouse later on. And he's just wearing his regular spider suit now, and he's all by himself, and he's all alone, and he gets trapped under tons of rubble. The Vulture takes off, and this is the all is lost, or the anchor point right before the Rubicon. And so he's the villain seemingly wins, and then Peter Parker, he's trapped under tons of rubble. He literally starts crying, and then he's screaming out for help. And in this moment, there's always that epiphany of inspiration, where whether positive or negative, here he's a triumphant protagonist, is positive, where he then reflects back on that boat scene where he's moments from dying, and you see Tony Stark's face on the screen, and it says, if you need the suit to be Spider-Man, then you shouldn't be wearing it. In that moment is when he finally realizes the meaning of those words, and that's when he realizes, oh my God, I've never needed the suit. This whole time I thought I needed the suit to be Spider-Man, but I don't. And this whole time I thought becoming an Avenger would make me a better Spider-Man. I don't. That's when he's overcoming his dominant character flaw of doubt, because he stops doubting himself. Now, it changes an instant, so he doesn't instantly do it. That's setting him on the path for the rest of the movie. But he then bursts from the rubble as the Spider-Man that he has been the entire time. Now that he's confident, and he goes and chases after the Vulture on the plane. The plane wrecks. He fights the Vulture and webs him up and leaves him for the police. And then you have an end cap that really shows his change, because he's then taken to Tony Stark. There's a news conference waiting in the next room, and Tony's planning on giving the suit back and making him an Avenger, and they're going to announce it and all that stuff. And he's in Peter Parker, because he doesn't need that anymore. This is a display of him having overcome his dominant character flaw, just like with Gladiator. I can get into that too if you want. Where with Russell Crowe, where he says, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm just going to stick to being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for a while," because he doesn't need to be Avenger to be Spider-Man. He doesn't need his suit to be Spider-Man. He is Spider-Man. The whole trope of the powers within him all along. That's what he realized, and that's what he needed. He needed to overcome his dominant character flaw of doubt or insecurity, again, however you want to put it, with self-confidence, and belief in himself. That's what he needed the whole time, and that's what the whole movie's about. And that's pretty much my diatribe on Spider-Man Homecoming. I can get into way more detail about that, but
and the wound and the sword and the shield. So it was the loss. I have not actually seen Spider-Man Homecoming, but people are telling me that it's fantastic. So I've got to see that one. But
yeah, my favorite scene in the movie is whenever the Vulture, but he's not the Vulture. He's just what's her butt's dad. He's driving them to the prom. It is such a fantastic scene because she gets out and he goes, "Oh, go ahead into the prom, Gumdrock. I'm going to give him the dad talk." And then that's whenever it's kind of a repeat of the midpoint because at the midpoint, but this happens towards the end of Act 2B, right before the All Is Lost and the Rubicon and all that stuff. It's a repeat because in superhero movies, you often have a in regular movies, you often have a face-to-face with an antagonist and protagonist by the midpoint of the latest, so that they recognize each other as the obstacle in each other's way, and one of them needs to be removed for the other to be successful at obtaining or achieving their goal. Well, it's very common in superhero movies because they wear disguises and stuff that during the midpoint, at the latest, they'll recognize each other as the obstacles, but they're in their suits, and then sometime during the middle to end of Act 2B, they'll then recognize each other in their true identities, and that's what happens in the Spider-Man Homecoming because he turns around, he pulls a gun out, and all of a sudden the tone just gets seriously dark, and he's like, if you ever mess with my business again or my family or whatever, I'll kill you, and I'll kill everyone you've ever loved. And Peter's just like, holy crap, he wasn't expecting that, but there's these weird vibes before that because Peter's spider sense is going off, but he's not sure quite what's wrong, and then he realizes at that moment, oh crap, he's the Vulture. And the Vulture realized that Peter Parker, because of his daughter blabbing on the way to the prom, she accidentally puts two and two together for her dad. That he realizes, oh crap, Peter Parker's Spider-Man. That son of a bitch. I love that scene in that movie. That's probably my favorite scene in there.
The Gladiator is a great movie, James says. As for those keeping track, this is your first Rome thought of the day, right? Yes, guys, we think about the Roman Empire. How often do we think we just did? We just did. So, all right, we've got the Roman Empire. One theme that comes up often when we're talking on Table Talk, especially with my friend Brianna and I, both Brianna and I want to write stories of the fall, and so we had been analyzing different fall arcs. And actually trying to understand what the fall is. And by this, basically, we meant that we were basically trying to take the ultimate good guy to the ultimate bad guy. The fall of Lucifer. Probably what Anakin Skywalker's arc should have been, even though it was kind of messed up in the prequel. I didn't see you ever talk specifically about the fall, but you did talk a lot about tragic heroes. What do you think is the relationship between a fall arc and a tragic hero? I was wondering, are they the same thing? Did you come up with a structure for a fall when you're defining a tragic hero? Or do you think they're the same, or do you think they're different? Or maybe you hadn't thought about it before. So I might be putting you on the spot.
Well, I've never heard of it put in that way before, of like the fall, but it sounds to me like it's you're talking about the tragic hero arc, because they're supposed to be, they're dealing with their dominant character flaw, but they eventually surrender to instead of overcome. One of the main reasons why the Rubicon is such an important, it's the most crucial moment in your story that happens towards the end of Act 2, at the end of Act 2B, is because that's the defining moment where the protagonist, whether trying for the tragic, they're confronting their dominant character flaw. Every protagonist, this is very important, every protagonist has two antagonists. This is where a lot of writers go wrong. You have the external antagonist, the Vulture to Spider-Man, the Lex Luthor to Superman or whatever. That's the antagonist that is confronted during the Act 3 climax everybody knows about. Because you have two antagonists, you also have two climaxes. Okay, the first climax is actually the Rubicon, and that's where the protagonist confronts their internal antagonist, which is their dominant character flaw. That's why it's so important. And that's going to determine whether they're going to fall. Now, I understand there could be a difference between, you're talking about the story where it even begins from a fall from grace, right? Like, are you talking about stories where like they might begin that way and the whole story's about the fall, or are you talking about where they eventually fall?
Where they eventually fall, like if you took if you displayed like Lucifer as the greatest angel of heaven, and that's how the story started, and then you're going to take him to be the devil by the end. or Anakin Skywalker, where he is the best Jedi ever, and you're going to end up as Darth Vader by the end of this.
Yeah, that version would definitely be where the protagonist is during the Rubicon, instead of overcoming, they surrender to their dominant character flaw, and then that rest of the part would be their fall from grace. They're gonna also receive an inspirational epiphany, but it's in the wrong. It steers them in the wrong direction, because the change. Every story is about change, and you got a flawed protagonist. They battle back and forth between their flaw and their virtue, and then they eventually choose one or the other, and they're either rewarded or punished. Well, the change is either for positive or negative, and so the fall would obviously be a negative change. I actually have a book that I think you would like. I read right here. It actually costs a lot. I have no idea who this person is in real life or not. I just ordered this off of Amazon. It's a great book. It's called The Villain's Journey. It goes through all of the fall arcs of tons. I mean, the whole thing. It's just a huge book. When I bought it, it was like $50 on Amazon. I couldn't believe it. But it was worth it. So
that does sound like exactly what I need to read.
Tons of information on. Oh yeah, like if you're interested in the fall, this is definitely a book that you need to read. I mean, it's full of nothing but fall arcs and villain arcs, and has tons of stuff. Emperor Palpatine and stuff, Vader, Joker. I mean, everybody you can think of. And it goes into detail about their whole story arcs and stuff like that. Reminds me kind of a Megamind, where it's like it's kind of the exact opposite of the fall. I love that movie with Megamind, where he starts out as the bad guy and then he becomes the hero. I've always loved that movie. I thought it was pretty good.
Yes,
I actually cite that movie a lot in my Star Wars.
I saw Megamind was in there quite a bit. Yeah, I know. Another book to buy. I know. We got to get another book, but I got to send that one to Brianna, and we may have to analyze it. When we were talking about, so the tragic hero versus the fall, I suppose one possible difference would be at the very end, that the tragic hero may succumb to his flaw and die, and because he didn't make it out. Whereas somebody who falls doesn't die. Instead, they become the main bad guy. A
tragic hero doesn't always have to die.
It doesn't have to, no.
Just because they're no, like that. That's not like a like a requirement or nothing like that at all. The sole determinant. See, that's the funny thing about it, is the sole determinant whether your protagonist is a triumphant or tragic protagonist is their decision during the Rubicon, whether they overcome or surrender to their dominant character flaw. You can have tons of fantastic, happy things happen to your protagonist all throughout their story, but if they surrender to their dominant character flaw during the Rubicon, they're still a tragic protagonist. Just like vice versa. The movie Gladiator is known as a Greek tragedy, but he's not. Maximus he's not a tragic hero. He's a triumphant hero. He overcomes his dominant character flaw and then gets his reward. He dies in the end, but he gets his reward. He overcomes his dominant character flaw of revenge, winning revenge against Commodus, because Commodus murdered his family and tried to have him executed and all that stuff. But he shifts through the course of the story, he shifts from personal revenge to public justice. He's no longer trying to kill Commodus for murdering his family. He's now wanting to deal with Commodus because for the betterment of Rome, something he refused to do at the very beginning of the movie. And then he's then rewarded for it by he gets to even though he dies, he kills Commodus. In the end he gets his reward of revenge, but it's for all the right reasons now. And he then enters the Elysian Fields and is returned to his wife and son, his murdered wife and son. That's his part of his reward. And the senators are reinstated because of it, and the whole tyranny of Commodus is over. He saves Rome when before he refused to do that. So the Maximus Gladiator story isn't actually a tragic hero, even though if you Google it, that's why I was saying before, like you have conflicting things online about certain things. If you Google it, it'll tell you it's like a tragic hero, but it's not, because he overcomes dominant character flaw.
That's a great point. I'm gonna have to watch Gladiator again, because here's a book recommendation as well. I brought this up before to people on the show. They'll know this. Drake's Brutal Writing Advice. It's by Maxwell Alexander Drake.
No.
this book sort of
No, I don't
reminds
think I've
me
seen it.
of yours in style. Both very straightforward, very to the point, very, all right, let me get. I saw him at Gen Con speak one time, and he was actually one of the first people that I heard speak. I told you, and you also write in your book, that sometimes it's really hard to find good books on story. And I saw this guy speak, and he had said things I had never heard before, and so I went immediately over to his booth to buy it. And he talks a little bit about the tragic arc. He talks about how to build one, but you're actually much more sophisticated. He talks about mainly at the end of the story, setting up like if Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars is about faith versus technology. Although you often say that characters like Luke Skywalker about faith versus doubt. So you could recast Luke Skywalker as, is it faith in the Force or doubt in the Force? But although in this case, faith in the Force is doubt in the Force, rather, would be faith in technology. So it's technology, faith, but you could say faith and doubt. But at any rate, he says that you set up this story so that the audience knows what is the right answer in the context of that Star Wars movie. And the right answer in the context of Star Wars is choose faith. Choose the Force. And so Luke chooses the Force at the end of Star Wars, and so is able to blow up the Death Star. So it's a happy ending story. But if Luke had chosen technology or doubt and gone ahead with his targeting computer, he would have had to have failed the shot, which means the Death Star would not have been blown up. Yavin would have been blown up. The princess would be dead because he's still trying to save the princess at that point because she's in danger. But also the whole rebellion would end. But that the message of the story would still be the same. The answer is faith. That would have communicated that to the audience. So that's what he was talking about, flipping that. I think you would agree with that, except for you build in, you'll let me know in just a second, but you build in a much deeper structure into the rest of the whole movie that if you were going to tell Star Wars with Luke Skywalker as a tragic hero, he is going to choose technology instead of faith. But you set up that he can't just make that decision swap at the end. You have to actually build up and reverse so many of the earlier plot points in the movie in order to lead him to that decision. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So if he did choose technology, so if he actually did choose technology over faith, you're saying that you would have to change some of the plot points? Yeah, you would. You definitely would.
Well, to conform to your structure, because I'm sorry, we are talking.
Well, you have to lead the reader to and you can hearings too. Yeah, you have to put little breadcrumbs throughout your story to so that because if you don't want something to just happen and have it the God in the machine, the Deus Ex Machina happen because then it's not going to make that much sense. But if you cleverly disguise the things leading up to that sudden twist or whatever, it may be in the reader's subconscious mind or the audience's subconscious mind if we're talking movies. But once it happens, they're then going to their brain is going to immediately reflect and go and remember all those plot points that did lead to that. They're going to go, oh, duh, okay, and it's going to be that much more satisfying when it does happen. So yeah, you would definitely want to change at least a couple plot points along the way if you're changing the ending.
If you just swap the end, I mean, I think Drake is right in what he says about how it would end and how it would have to end in order to get the same message. But you can't just swap it. You have to pull the story strings like is being talked about in Stomp the Kittens to invert some of the story points in order to make that come up. I think that's completely right. There is a delay in the stream. This is also a test. This is also a tech test. So
Well, one of the big things that you would have to is like I can go into just a real quick explanation for it. If you change the ending, you're changing the climax because the climax of Star Wars New Hope is that he chooses faith over he uses the Force moment. He chooses faith. That's going to be the climax. Well, if you change it so that he does use the technology and he abandons his faith in the Force and all that stuff, and then it ends up being a tragedy. That the climax is going to affect your midpoint and your anchor point and your Rubicon and all that other stuff. So those will automatically have to change because the climax is the midpoint on steroids, and the anchor point that happens right before the Rubicon depending on the genre, it can happen immediately after, like in Spider-Man Homecoming, to the point that it's almost the same. It's almost a part of the anchor point. Or more typically, like in romances and rom-com types of stuff, or whatever, they typically have a period of a lull between the anchor point and the Rubicon. But where the protagonist is miring in even more stasis equals death, because they're worse off than they were before. But you have, from your Rubicon, you get your midpoint, and then thus your climax, and then thus your anchor point, and then everything stems from that. Because you have to understand, the anchor point is the most crucial, or the Rubicon is the most crucial moment in your story, because everything up to that is leading to the Rubicon, and everything from that is stemming from the Rubicon. So that's one of the reasons why it's so great to start with that first, because you don't want to think of your plot as a linear A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're one from one to the other. You have to think of it as a spider web with the Rubicon as your central node, and then all the rungs after that. Each node on those rungs are all plot points, however many plot points you have, because you can have tons of them, and they're all interconnected. Your climax is going to affect your inciting incident. Your midpoint is going to affect your Rubicon, and everything should be affecting everything else. Your plot should be a spider web. It shouldn't be linear. From opening hook to inciting incident to this and that, and to physical crossing, and then the pinch point and the midpoint. You have to stop thinking of it in like a linear fashion and think of it more of a spider web, and everything is interconnected. Because you change one thing, it should be affecting other things.
Will you let everyone know more explicitly what the Rubicon is, as we've talked about? And yes, that's a Roman reference too. So that is another reason to think about the Roman Empire today. So let's talk about what the Rubicon is.
Well, the Rubicon is, I'll keep repeating this, the most crucial moment in your story, because it's how I said that you have two antagonists and two climaxes. It's the first climax. It happens most typically at the end of Act 2B. Sometimes it can happen at the beginning of Act 3. It just depends on your particular story. That's what's great about plot. You can move around and rearrange plot points and stuff like that when you know how to do it. But most typically it happens at the end of Act 2B. It's usually happens at the end of Act 2B, and that's the linchpin that holds Act 2B and Act 3 together, because then they move into Act 3 and stuff from it. But it's the moment where your protagonist, after going through all the adversity and all the back and forth between the fall versus virtue argument, you put them, as the writer, think of it like a funnel. Act 1, Act here, try to get on camera. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, going down that way. You have to think of your fall versus virtue argument as a funnel, and you're increasing the conflict, but dwindling the decisions and choices throughout all of your story till that pinpoint where you hit the Rubicon. You put them trapped between a rock and a hard space hard place where they only have one choice: to either overcome or surrender to their dominant character flaw. And after that, they have to live with that decision, because that's the rest of your story. That is Act 3, because it leads to them being either rewarded or punished. Well, that's where they face their internal antagonists, because during the second climax, the well-known one at the end of Act 3, that's where they confront their external antagonist. Okay? And typically the external antagonist is just a physical manifestation of the internal antagonist. Okay, so especially when you're writing horror stories and like you have like fear versus courage, and the internal antagonist is some kind of phobia or something like that, you'll then typically have some kind of physical monster representing that phobia that the protagonist has to overcome. But the internal antagonist is your protagonist's dominant character flaw, and they confront it during the Rubicon, and that's where they make the defining decision to either overcome it or surrender to it. And then that's going to determine whether they're a triumphant or tragic protagonist. If they overcome it, they're a triumphant protagonist, and they're going to now be rewarded with success against the external antagonist against during the Act 3 climax. If they surrender to it, that makes them a tragic protagonist, and that condemns them to lose against the external antagonist during the Act 3 climax. So they all play off each other. That's why I said the midpoint, the climax, and the anchor point, the Rubicon, and all that stuff, how they're so interconnected. Those all change. If you change one of those things, all the other ones will change. You change the climax, it's going to change the midpoint, the anchor point, the Rubicon. You change any of those, it changes all the other ones. Hopefully that explains it a bit.
Yeah, I think Sable has lots of thoughts here. Sable says that funnel idea is why I still maintain that Civil War is the best Marvel film. It makes that funnel explicit, and the physicality of it mirrors the thematic manifestation of the conflict.
That Civil War was great. I know I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but I love Thor Ragnarok. that's my favorite MCU movie is Thor Ragnarok. I love Civil War too, but I love Thor Ragnarok.
Why is that? Why is Thor Ragnarok so fantastic?
I love it because it's the most entertaining version, at least in my personal opinion, of Thor. They ruin Thor after that and make him just look at Thor in Love and Thunder. He's just a total dumbass and stuff. And then in Game they make him this big fat loser and all kinds of stuff. And before that, he wasn't. The Thor movies were okay, but he wasn't really fleshed out that well. And he was basically just he's this god, but they didn't really know what to do with him because I call it the Superman syndrome. He's so overpowered that it's hard to figure out what to do. Look at movies that have Superman. It's one of the reasons why we Batman is usually the main focal character. In the Justice League, he's the only human. He's the one we can relate to. You stab him, he bleeds. You shoot him, he dies. All the other ones, they're living gods. Superman has so many powers that it's hard to relate to him. And so it's hard to. That's one of the reasons why I think it was 9 years after Superman's creation, they introduced Kryptonite, because they got to the point where he's got so many powers. Because every issue they give him a new power. They're like, well, he's got so many powers, we don't know what to do with them. So they created Kryptonite and introduced that into the comic books. And then years after that, they then started paring down his powers so that he's still got tons of powers. But I mean, he's down to his whole, frost breath, heat vision, speed, strength, and all that other stuff. But if you watch a Superman movie, he can move almost as fast as the Flash anytime he wants. But he does it. Typically, he'll do it like one time in the movie. If I can move that fast or shoot laser beams out of my eyes, I'd be doing it all the time. I wouldn't be doing it every once in a while. Superman should be just ripping ass through all the enemies. Yeah, excuse my language. Because he's got so many powers. I mean, he can just tear into anybody. But they need. That's the problem with having a Mary Sue or Marty Stu character, just like Captain Marvel in her crappy ass movie. Just she's just as invincible to be in the movie as she is at the end of the movie. Literally, the only difference is she recovered her memories. That's it. She's a total Mary Sue. Well, you don't really know what to do with a character like Superman. Marvel has their version in the Hulk, but the great thing about the Hulk, which is just a ripoff of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, is that he has the Bruce Banner counterpart, the human counterpart. So they kind of took the Superman character, because the Hulk is just basically invincible, and they added the whole Dr. Jekyll part where he's that vulnerable human. So that kind of brings the Hulk down. But Superman a lot of writers have a hard time writing for him because you have to make practically everything a cosmic threat in order for him to be, because he's a living god. Who's going to beat up Superman? You know what I mean? Except for Batman. That's the Batman factor. I can go into that. Sorry, my dog's barking. She heard somebody outside.
Yeah, Superman is one of my least favorite characters for that reason. And yes, now I didn't know all the history. You're talking about Kryptonite being introduced later. But yeah, you can't do anything to him. And that in order for him to be vulnerable, it always had to be Kryptonite. So you then start to watch the same story because Superman can do whatever he wants. And then, Kryptonite. And I saw that story several times because the only thing that could happen is Kryptonite to Superman. And that got old.
Yeah. Somehow Kryptonite's really rare, but yet every villain somehow comes across it and makes a Kryptonite bullet or a Kryptonite this or that, in every episode. And you're like, what the hell is going on here? How much? I thought there's barely anyone on Earth, and yes, everybody has access to it.
Let's see. Well, okay. Why don't you? We got just about 8 minutes left or something like that here in the show. Why don't you talk about your fantasy stuff then? How you've actually implemented this? And your books and your fantasy, so people might want to check them out.
My Soothsayer series, that kind of goes with the whole Superman thing. I firmly believe, and it's just like some of the best books I've ever read. You take a protagonist, and when you give them a power, you have to give them an equal, if not greater, consequence for using the power. The main character Banzu. His name's Banzu. He's a cursed swordsman who can slow time, but at the cost of accelerated aging, which means that he can slow time so that he's still moving fast or, whatever, but everything else is slowed. But he's also aging accelerated because of it. So it's kind of like the concept of if you smoke a cigarette, it takes 6 minutes off your life. That's actually where I got it from. And so every time he uses his power, it's aging him that much faster. Not a big deal in the short term, but in the long term, over the course of a couple years, instead of aging 5 years, he's aging 10 or 15 because he's using his power all the time. So it's not an immediate. It's kind of an immediate consequence, but it's not an immediate big consequence. But every time he uses his power, he should he needs to question: is this worth dying that much sooner? The thing I hated about fantasy growing up is that there was always this bumbling, absent-minded, old gray-haired wizard dude was just shooting wizard's fire out of his hands all over the place. And the only consequence for it was he'd get tired. Are you kidding me? Tired? What the hell is that? I mean, that's if I could shoot fire out of my hands, I'd burn my house down right now. Why not? I'd be doing it all the time. I'll take a nap and start doing it over again. What kind of consequence is that?
Yeah, I get tired because I by the natural end of the day, I'm tired. So might as well have shot fireball.
I actually kind of made fun of that trope, the whole wizard's fire trope, because I made a character in it's actually in my Soothsayer series. I think it's in the second one, Jin. There's one character where can shoot wizard's fire and all that, but the consequence for it is that he has to ingest a large amounts of alcohol. So when he's doing it, he's drunk off his ass. And he also, when he burns the alcohol out of the system, he got a massive hangover. So I mean, like you have to give people consequences for stuff like that. So I mean, he's able to do fire and combust himself and all that stuff. But my Soothsayer series, I'm a sucker for romance stuff. I love romance movies. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time is Untamed Heart. I love that movie. I'm just a sucker for stuff like that, especially tragic romances. And I don't want to give too much details away if you haven't read the books or nothing. But there's is the particulars, but what the overarching thing in my Soothsayer series is the romance between Banzu and Melora, the protagonist and the love interest. There's tons of other stuff going on. Like they've got to take on a demonic cult called the Enclave that is trying to restart the 1,000 Years' War, because everybody who can do magic is called Isekai. You're either born able to do it or you're not. And so they're trying to kill the rest of the Isekai because they lost the war, the 1,000 Years' War. It's called the 1,000 Years' War because it lasted 1,000 years. But they're trying to restart it because most of the Isekai were killed during that war. And so now they're trying to finish off, genocide the rest of the Isekai so they can then take over the rest of the whole world and all that stuff. And Banzu's gets pulled into this conflict to stop them. And they're trying to resurrect a living god to help them do it. In Hannibal Khan. And he ends up, they end up clashing and all that other stuff. So that's pretty much like the whole thing with my Soothsayer series.
Okay. Is there another series?
For fantasy, it's just my Soothsayer series. I've got a couple other books like Kinslayer. That's my take on the version, the Cain and Abel story. It's told 20 years after Cain kills Abel, and the main character, the protagonist, is Seth, and he goes to hunt down Cain for the murder of their brother, but he doesn't really know why it happened or all that other stuff, and it kind of has a little bit more of a Western feel to it. Yeah, my
that's
12-year-old niece made that cover for me. So, I love it.
Well, that's interesting.
That was actually the first novel I ever wrote. It used to be called My Brother. I actually rewrote it.
The biblical storytelling is something that we come up with, also talk about quite a bit here. For some reason, it also inspires a lot of us. It's so interesting that we come up with. I talk on the show about how we've come up with this group of people who all have very similar interests: the storytelling, the hero quest, biblical influences on storytelling. That's really interesting because I've been working on one of the series that I want to do is biblically inspired like this. And I also want to talk about Cain and Abel and Seth. Seth being one of the main characters in one of the stories. And Brianna also talks about biblical storytelling. We've talked about some of our favorite biblical stories. So that's fascinating too.
Oh yeah, the Bible's even whether I don't want to get into like the whole religious thing because I don't want to offend anybody or whatever. But like the Bible's, whether you believe it or not, the Bible's a fascinating book to read. There's tons of interesting stories in it. So whether you're religious or not, you should read the Bible anyways because there's just tons of things in it, that you don't get told, like in church or something like that. You can go into the details yourself. And there's also tons of books that were never canonized, like the books of Enoch and stuff like that. That just they were canonized to be in there. The book of Enoch, I actually printed that out years ago. I love that book. That's a very detailed, interesting book about going to hell and going to heaven and actually describe in detail, going there and stuff like that. I found that fascinating,
James says, these are now my Amazon card. I want to read the stories you wrote and stand them up against your series on writing. That should prove even more clarity. When you're saying about, you don't even learn in church, isn't that so weird that, even when you're in church and in Sunday school, all of the great stories that are in the Bible that have influenced so much of our culture, because they influence other stories that have been told after the Divine Comedy, James, but lots of parts of Shakespeare. I mean, there's so much so many references you don't understand if you don't understand the biblical stories. And it's so weird that even when you go to church, you hear just like a passage or a phrase, and that's it. And I remember it was in fourth grade that I was in Sunday school, and my fourth grade Sunday school was phenomenal. That's when it was the first time that I actually wanted to go to church and go to Sunday school, because the Sunday school teachers in fourth grade actually taught the story of the book of Joseph, or Joseph in the Coat of Many Colors, not the book of Joseph, but the story of Joseph in the Coat of Many Colors, and all of this. And for the first time, I was going, wow, this is fantastic. This whole, taught in context as a story, and not just being told in Sunday school, hey, don't kick your sister, but instead actually getting into what's there. And when people do that, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the Bible that people, and tons of other religious stuff. I've been fascinated with religions my whole life. Even as a kid, I used to really read religious stuff because it's fantastical stuff, And there's tons of stuff in the Bible that a lot of people, they go, that's just the Bible, wherever they eschew it. But it's because they're told, like you said, they're only told little bits and pieces. They're not ever given like the interesting stuff. I mean, there's some wild and crazy stuff in there that's really interesting. Especially, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Sable says the Bible is the cornerstone of Western literature. You'll miss so much that's implicitly referenced in literature if you don't know the Bible.
Well, that's like I can't remember the specific passage, but it talks about how one day to God is 1,000 years to man, and that's where a lot of people, some, not all Christians obviously, but some of the Christians that say that everything in the creation and stuff like that is only around 10 or 11,000 years old. Well, it's because you got the 7 days of Genesis, so they counted the 7 days of God. That's the 7,000 years, and then the whole before, during, and after Jesus and stuff, and all that worked out. That's where, if you're ever curious where that came from, that's where it came from. It's the whole 1 day to God is 1,000 years to man. I've always found that fascinating.
Okay. Well, now I've been showing off the Amazon cards, but where's the best place to actually follow you? Because we've been going for about an hour here. Do you have what's your main social media, or do you have one or whatever? If people want to know what's going on with you and what stuff you're bringing out, how do they do that?
I don't have social media. Dude, I'm so anti-social media. It ain't even funny, man. I wouldn't even have a cell phone if I didn't have to have it just for in case of emergencies or something like that. I have no social media. I have a website, adronjsmitley.blogspot.com. Tons of free stuff on there for just all articles are free on there. That's pretty much my social media. I have a Facebook that I log on once a year. I only have it just to keep in contact with people that have moved out of state or something. But I mean, I don't tweet or any of that other stuff. I don't pretend I'm a fake online celebrity in Instagram or Snapchat or any of that other stuff.
So this is the Blogspot, right? Yeah. This is it. So I will put this link in here though. Blogspot.
Oh, cool.
Well, maybe so. We're going to get back together. So maybe Brianna's the same way. She doesn't have social media, so her following up with Brianna is basically following Table Talk, because she's one of our regulars on Table Talk. So maybe we'll get a few tech issues sorted out, but then we'll do Table Talk and we'll dive into this even deeper and talk about a whole bunch of things.
Okay.
So hey,
I can talk for an hour how long you want. However long you want, I can talk.
All right. James says, you are super down to earth. I appreciate that. Heath, Brianna, and Doug all come across the same way. So I think we'll have some great discussion. James says, maybe we found a new regular panel member. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Stay with me. I'm going to close this out on the live stream, though, that we'll go back behind the scenes after this. So, everybody, this has been a great Table Talk, a surprise Table Talk, because we don't often have guests on Table Talk. But it's fantastic that all of a sudden we're going through all of these books that were helping us out so much. And then we all of a sudden get to talk to the author. So this is incredible. So everybody have a wonderful day. Stay creative, stay productive, and grind on. I will see you later.